Welcome to Pennsylvania in Focus. I'm Kristen Smith, Pennsylvania editor for the Center Square. Joining me today is the Center Square's Pennsylvania reporter, Anthony Hennon. This week in elections across the country, we saw lots of interesting policy be handed off to the voters. Interestingly, in Ohio, voters decided to legalize marijuana for recreational use, making Pennsylvania the only state in the mid-Atlantic Northeast region to have done so. Lawmakers have talked about it for several years now with their eyes on the tax money that we would get from it. But it seems like Ohio kind of beating us to the punch, it's going to have an impact on how much money we can make, right, Anthony?
Yeah, so Ohio is now the 24th state that's legalized marijuana for recreational use, which sort of puts Pennsylvania in an interesting bind here. When you look around, every neighbor bordering Pennsylvania, except for West Virginia, now has legalized recreational use. And so a lot of this push for legalizing it in the Commonwealth kind of comes from two levels. One is a concern about criminal justice, fairness, et cetera, et cetera. And the other push is coming from this idea of the potential tax revenue and the tax benefits that would come from legalizing it. But as we've seen from a lot of these states that have legalized it, the later in the game that you actually do it, the harder it is to really achieve that level of ideal tax money coming in. So when California legalized it, when Colorado, no one else around them had it. So it's a pretty big boost, financially speaking. But as more and more neighbors and more people, more states around you do it, that tends to decline a little bit. And that can also make it a little harder to transfer the illicit market over into a regulated market. So, there's still this push. There's still this sense that with every other state, almost every other state doing it around Pennsylvania, we will follow at least sometime in recent years, even if the federal government still does not take it off their prohibited substances list. But there are some bumps in the road, you could say, from being the last one to come around to it.
And it seems like even in Ohio, some lawmakers aren't pleased with what voters chose to do, even though now they will have to follow through with legislation to do this. But there's a lot of, even in Pennsylvania, and perhaps this is what's holding our legislature back in general, it's not just that they believe that the social impacts do not outweigh the tax revenues. Is that something that's still weighing on the minds of lawmakers who do not support legalization?
Yeah, so the common concerns that we hear, generally this has been legislative Republicans. I am not sure I've heard any Democrats really pushing this as a big reason not to legalize. But a lot of this concern comes from, one, health impacts of legalizing it, because every state where we have seen legalized recreational use, we've also seen general increases in use. Surveys of young people have admitted that they're smoking more than they were before. There's concerns about the concentrations and the resulting social costs of this. So, there's some places, some studies are drawing connections between increased medical visits, increased issues with schizophrenia or homelessness. So that's one part of it. Another part is concerns over Second Amendment issues, where if you legalize it, but federally it remains prohibited, that could put some people in a bind over gun ownership versus using this substance that's federally prohibited. There's also concerns of how do you regulate impaired driving of someone who's high and then goes out driving. Where do you set the line? How do you enforce that? So there's a number of concerns that, we may get some boosts in tax revenue, but there's also some health risks, also some criminal justice issues, also some other social impacts that follow.
Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com. For Anthony Hennon, this is Kristen Smith. Please subscribe and thanks for listening.